I watch a pretty good amount of TV every year, and a lot of the time there's stuff that I would like to talk about on this channel, but I just don't feel that I have enough to say to warrant a whole video, so I never end up talking about it. But today, I want to change that. I thought, why not talk about a bunch of stuff I've watched recently in one video? It's a groundbreaking idea, I know, and I'm glad I came up with it. So, without further ado, because let's be honest, I rarely have anything of substance to say in the introductions of my videos, let's talk about some shows I've watched recently. This is your official spoiler alert, you have been warned. Number 1. Shadow and Bone Season 2. This came out a while ago now, but it's not my fault for not talking about it sooner. It's Netflix's fault for releasing it during the hellish period of the academic year where midterms rolls into finals without a break. Season 2 of Shadow and Bone adapts the rest of the main trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. Whereas Season 1 adapted the first book of the Grisha trilogy, Season 2 adapts the second and third books together. I think this was both a good and bad decision. It seems like the kind of idea that might sound good on paper, but falters in its execution. Let's be honest, Book 2 is boring as hell. Siege and Storm is, in my opinion, the weakest installment of the series. In a lot of ways, it falls into filler book syndrome. This often happened with popular YA series back in the day, since the commercial way to tell a story in the 2010s was in a trilogy, meaning that these stories would be forcibly split into 3 volumes, regardless of whether or not the amount of story there was to tell actually warranted it. The Grisha trilogy fell victim to this as well, and I think Siege and Storm might be one of the best examples of filler book phenomenon. A lot of time is wasted, and much of it feels like we're just sitting around waiting for the next big thing to happen. The best things to come out of Siege and Storm are the introduction of Nikolai, and that's it. It's crazy how much Nikolai carried that book on his back. Tolia and Tamara did their share of heavy lifting as well, but Nikolai really stole that book. I think Season 2 of Shadow and Bone proves that it is possible to tell the remainder of this story in one installment. The season included pretty much every major plot point in the final 2 books. The introduction of Nikolai, Tamara and Tolia, Jenya's attack, the attack on the palace, Alina finding the Sea Beast and learning that Mal is the third amplifier, killing Mal, destroying the Fold, killing the Darkling, and resuscitating Mal. It's all there, even if the manner of presentation of some of it is different. The only major plot point not included is Nikolai Beast Mode, and I'm okay with that. I'm fine with the show only hinting at it and leaving it to be explored in a later season. It adds a heightened sense of dread concerning this beloved character. If the show was just about the final 2 books in the series, I think it could have worked. The problem, however, is that the show also has to juggle the crows, and at that point, I think it's doing too much. Don't get me wrong, I love the crows, I will get to them in more depth in a minute, but trying to tell the stories of the last 2 books and a separate crow storyline that goes in and out of relevance to the main plot were the major reasons for this season's issues. It feels dramatic to call it hubristic to think you could do all 3, but that's the first word I thought of, so I'm going with it. The cracks already began to show in the first half of the season, but it's the second half where things really fall apart. The last 4 episodes are messy, to say the least. There is a ton going on all at once. It's not balanced very well, and it's just a lot to swallow. And it sucks because, again, I think the last 2 books could have been consolidated into one season, even if it would mean changing some elements, given that the show didn't also have to spend time with the crows. I want to discuss Alina and Kirigan quickly. The exploration of their loneliness is something I really wanted to see, especially from Kirigan, since it's one of the defining things that makes him who he is. But the show didn't do it as well as I wanted it to. The Darkling says multiple times that because of their very natures, he and Alina understand each other better than most. In fact, each is the only person in the world to completely understand the other. It's a really interesting aspect to their relationship and makes them being on opposite sides all the more tense. But it kind of falls flat to me because Alina has great relationships with the people around her. She loves Mal, values Nikolai, and gets along pretty well with Tamara and Tolia. It seems that these people do understand her. Alina and Kirigan's relationship would be so much better if there were moments in the show where Alina was disconnected from other people. And I'm not talking about when she's angry with them or disagreeing with them. No, I mean just in normal situations where they're in each other's presence. We could see that while she loves the people around her, she still feels this inexplicable sense of distance from them. When she tries to explain it to them, they don't get it. They don't feel what she does, which only makes her feel even further from them. Then, when Kirigan says to her that they're one and the same and that he's the only person who will ever be able to understand her, there's more weight behind that assessment, because we can tell it's true to some extent. Nikolai is here, and I like him for the most part. I was initially excited because it seemed like the show was going to do away with the love triangle aspect of the books. I know a lot of people really liked it, but I didn't, because of course Alina was going to end up with Mal anyway, so it was wholly unnecessary to me. It would have been even more unnecessary in the show since Alina and Mal are so in love from the very beginning. Like, Alina has eyes for no one else. I like platonic Alina and Nikolai. They're really cute, they have good chemistry, and I think they could have had such a wholesome friendship. But then the show continued, and it's revealed that Nikolai does have feelings for Alina, and I just don't care, especially because Alina has no romantic feelings for him. In fact, it kind of hurt to learn that information since I was so ready for a purely platonic relationship between the two. I will say that I appreciate that Nikolai understands that Alina and Mal love each other, and he doesn't want to get in the way of that at all, but if the show wasn't going to go the messy route with the relationship between Alina, Mal, and Nikolai, then it could have benefited from some other kind of conflict. I like that the three have an amicable relationship, but I will say that there is a major lack of conflict between them after Nikolai reveals his true identity. Okay, I think I've paid the rest of the show enough attention, now let's get to the actual stars of the story. The Crows absolutely ate this season. These guys stole this show so easily, it's actually kind of hilarious. This is not Shadow and Bone anymore, it's a Six of Crows prequel story with some Shadow and Bone sprinkled on top. From a storytelling perspective, it's not great that a B-plot overshadows the A-plot as easily as this, but you know what? I don't care to break it down or offer solutions because The Crows are amazing, and season 2 proves that they should have just adapted Six of Crows from the jump. Hands down, the best scene of the entire season is in episode 4, when Kaz confronts Pekka Rollins and defeats him for good. This scene is so good, it makes me yearn for a show solely focusing on the Crows. It shows us what we could have, and honestly, it proves that Kaz alone could carry this show. Freddie Carter's performance is outstanding. He is so subtly terrifying. I was sitting there mesmerized.
Sign both, if you want to find your son alive. You'll need all your men digging to find him in time.
Okay dude, just straight up evil, we love to see it. This scene solidified who Kaz Brekker is. This is the scene that really showed why he owns the barrel. Kaz Brekker, a man who threatens another man's son in front of him and his henchmen, says he buried that child alive and put the man on his knees begging for mercy. That is Kaz Brekker. My one issue with the scene is that Kaz revealed all this information about his brother in front of Pekka's men and Nina and Jesper, which I don't think he would do. Kaz is a very unreadable person. In fact, I'm pretty sure that most of the Crows go through the duology not knowing a single thing about Kaz's past. It's only Inej who knows, and it takes Kaz a lot of time and effort to be able to tell her anything. So doing this in a crowded room that includes his friends, when he would probably rather stab himself than open up to them, seems a tiny bit out of character. But it's such a small complaint within an overall knockout scene. While I love the Crows, I have some concerns. One, the point I made in my video discussing the first season still stands for the most part in the second season, which is that they feel a little disconnected from the A-plot. In episodes 2, 3, and 4, the Crows are doing their own thing entirely by themselves in Ketterdam. During their portions in these episodes, there is no mention of the Sun Summoner or the Darkling or the civil war slowly brewing in Ravka. They're kind of in their own little world. It feels like they're in a different story altogether. A good story, but a different one nonetheless. And I think the reason it feels like that is because technically the Crows are from a different story altogether. They had no original place in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and you can really feel it in these episodes where they're speedrunning the B-plot of the Six of Crows duology. That's another concern I have. There were a lot of aspects from Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom in this season, such as Kaz fighting a bunch of dudes all at once to gain control of the gang, Matthias fighting in Hellgate, and of course, Kaz taking down Pekka Rollins. Also, the relationship between Jesper and Wylan is developed in this season to the point where they're basically together by the end of it. It takes the entire duology to come to fruition, and even Kaz and Inej are being developed to the point where a scene from what I think is the middle of Crooked Kingdom is placed at the end of this season. My question is, if we're using so many crucial elements from Six of Crows in Shadow and Bone, then what's going to be left for Six of Crows? Because apparently, a Six of Crows spin-off is in its early stages of development, and whether or not it actually comes to be probably will be based on if Shadow and Bone gets renewed. And it's not looking great since it's been months since the second season was released, and crickets. But given that a Six of Crows spin-off is greenlit, I can't help but wonder what the hell is going to happen in it. It's clear it'll tell the story of the book Six of Crows, Kaz's crew having to break the creator of Jorah Param out of the Fjerdan Ice Court where he's been imprisoned, but what about the subplots? What about relationships? What about Pekka Rollins? If so much has already been done in Shadow and Bone, the writers are going to have to fill the show with new ideas, and that can go downhill very quickly. A couple fast things to round this out. Genya was fantastic this season. Daisy Head stole every scene she was in. She showed up and performed like rent was due last week. She gives the best performance in the show, hands down. Finally, I'm on board with Mal leaving. Even though it's pretty obvious that Alina and Mal will eventually end up together, I understand his reasoning for wanting space from her. All his life he's been tied to Alina because of his bloodline. His life has always revolved around hers, so now that his purpose has been fulfilled, he doesn't know who or what he is anymore, and he needs to take time to figure it out. It's fine, I like it. I know a lot of people had issues with this season because it does stray from the books more dramatically than the first did. I understand that. If you get attached to a story, then seeing it changed can be difficult. But I don't really care as deeply as I once might have. When stories are adapted, some aspects have to be changed, just by the nature of shifting mediums. Further than that, if changes improve a story or rework it in a way that would work better for a new medium, then I'm on board. But if they harm the story, then yeah, I'll be upset. That's why I can see the little changes made in Catching Fire and think it's the greatest film of all time. It's why I can also take in the changes made in The Last Airbender and want to throw something at the screen. I get more in depth about adaptation in my videos about The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and Daisy Jones and the Six, so those links will be in the description if you're interested. In the end, Season 2 of Shadow and Bone is fine. It's got some good and it's got some bad, but I think there's room for this story to be a really great show. And that show is called Six of Crows. Just make that, please. Number 2, Queen Charlotte.
I will stand with you between the heavens and the earth.
So, Queen Charlotte, the 6-episode miniseries set in the Bridgerton universe following none other than Queen Charlotte, a young noblewoman brought from her home in Germany to England in order to marry King George, a man with numerous secrets that Charlotte is determined to learn. Like I did with Bridgerton, I have both good and bad things to say about Queen Charlotte, but in the spirit of positivity, I kinda just want to talk about the stuff that I liked. Because I already have a headache, and I think if I tried to critique this show, it would get worse. I just want to be positive about Bridgerton for once. I ended up liking Queen Charlotte more than Bridgerton, as I feel like a lot of the issues I had with Bridgerton were solved in Queen Charlotte. Some of my biggest complaints with Bridgerton were that the subplots felt useless as a result of too many characters that had nothing substantial to do, which in the end made the pacing a mess with so much of the show feeling like wasted time. Queen Charlotte doesn't suffer from this, or at least not as dramatically. There are really only 5 or 6 main characters, and they're both connected to each other and impact the plot in substantial ways that affect everyone. The titular Charlotte has no idea why everyone speaks of George so cryptically, nor does she understand his behavior, and she spends much of the show trying to uncover the truth of his mental state and help him through it. George tries desperately to keep Charlotte at arm's length to prevent her from ever finding out about his mental health issues, going to great lengths to cure himself so he may be a fit king and husband. Brimsley and Reynolds have the difficult tasks of attending to Charlotte and George respectively, with Reynolds trying to keep George's secret as Brimsley tries to help Charlotte uncover it, all while attempting to get the two of them together to, make an heir to the throne, which the Queen Mother is adamant about. A young Lady Danbury struggles with her awful husband, provides counsel to Charlotte on matters of marriage, and goes up against the Queen Mother to secure her place in British nobility. It works. It's a very simple story, and Queen Charlotte proves that simple can be good. When you're not trying to bloat your story with inconsequential fluff, you can focus on executing a concept that, while not the flashiest, is still solid. In a strange way, Queen Charlotte is kind of like a historical political drama, one with a lot of spicy times and a sometimes overwhelming focus on whether or not George actually loves Charlotte, but a political drama nonetheless. I mean, one of the major themes is protect the monarchy, and it can't get more political drama-y than that. I'm also not faulting the show for putting emphasis on the love story between Charlotte and George. I get it, it's Bridgerton, a show primarily about romance. That's fine, and I found the relationship between Charlotte and George to be alright. I don't particularly love them, they definitely have their moments, but they didn't blow me away, and that's kind of true of most Bridgerton love stories I've seen. While I have issues with Kate and Anthony from the second season of Bridgerton, I still enjoy them, but they don't have me in the chokehold that I wish that they did. There are only a few couples from television that have ever ruined my life, and unfortunately, no Bridgerton couple has managed to make it on that list yet. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed because Regency romance is so addictive, and there's so much opportunity for it to ruin my life. Let's hope at least one Bridgerton couple does it for me. I'm fine with Charlotte and George not hitting that hard because, for me, Queen Charlotte felt less like a straight love story and more like a story about the plight of women. The female characters lead this show, and each one is dealing with her own issues, all of which come down to her identity as a woman. Charlotte was summoned to England to marry a man she's never met, which she was never given a choice in, and spends much of the show trying to connect to him so that her existence here won't be miserable for the rest of her life. Lady Danbury is in a loveless marriage to a man who really only uses her for sex. After his death, she has to reckon with finally understanding, firsthand, romantic love for another person whom she can't be with as they're also in a relatively loveless marriage. In the present, and by that I mean where Bridgerton left off, Violet has to deal with desiring companionship years after her husband's death, which she can't have without being judged by their society and without feeling guilty for moving on from her late husband. They're all very real issues that women have been facing for centuries, and I appreciate Queen Charlotte for centering the women as they struggle to deal with them. Queen Charlotte also got some of its humor right.
What is his name?
I do not remember names. I am female.
Of course. Apologies.
I am a sucker for satirical humor, especially in historical fiction. Pointing out the absurdity of old money culture, especially when it's concerning nobility, will always itch the happy part of my brain. 2020's adaptation of Emma does this so well, specifically with the role of the servants, who just have to be there while the rich people do their rich people things. Like, oh, my employer is having a sexy Regency breakdown? Well, guess I'll have to give him space. My employer wants to pick flowers in the most dramatic way possible? Guess I have to hold them for her. It's so funny every time. Part of me wishes Queen Charlotte had leaned even heavier into this. I mean, Reynolds and Brimsley are right there. You could write a hilarious satire about the king and queen's attendants having to indulge their every whim and ensure the monarchy doesn't fall apart. I get that that wasn't the story they wanted to tell, but damn, I would pay money to see a version of Queen Charlotte where Reynolds and Brimsley are the main characters. Imagine, a show about Reynolds and Brimsley babysitting the king and queen and desperately trying to get them to do their royal duty, without divulging George's mental health on Reynolds' part, while trying to pry the secrets out for Charlotte on Brimsley's part, all while slowly falling in love themselves. And the whole thing is a silly, satirical, gay spectacle. If you're telling me you wouldn't want to see that, you gotta drink some water, my guy. Make sure you're not loopy from dehydration. Overall, Queen Charlotte is fine. I had fun with it. It made me laugh in both good and bad ways. Number 3. Never Have I Ever, Season 4, but also kind of the whole show. Let's end the video off with everyone's favorite disaster desi. I've been an avid viewer of Never Have I Ever since it first started airing, and 3 years later, it's over. Part of me has wanted to talk about this show on this channel for a while, but I just never got around to it, so now that it's over, I thought I'd give some opinions. Never Have I Ever is kind of a guilty pleasure for me. It's not the greatest show in the world, and a lot of it does make me cringe. The dialogue is atrocious a lot of the time. I get the tone of the show is supposed to be silly and over the top and borderline cheesy, but the fact that so many of the lines make me so embarrassed that I want to curl into myself until I disappear is indicative that they don't entirely pull it off. I'm okay with cheesy dialogue as long as it's good. Community is super cheesy at times, but the dialogue is never embarrassing to listen to. Quite the opposite, in fact. I enjoy the cheese of it because it's constructed well, and it kind of plays into the fact that Greendale is a sort of loser cult, and the Greendale 7 is the center of that.
Damn it, Annie. Have you been playing detective? You were gonna Nancy screw me out of my credit.
It all starts with a quick look-see into someone's bag, and then it's a brisk peek-a-rooney at our phone records, and before you can say 1984, the thought police are forcing you to bend and spread.
Bend and spread? Are the thought police gonna make love to us?
Do they find thoughts in our butts? I knew I should have read that book.
Aside from the weird dialogue, I really enjoy the character progression in Never Have I Ever. Season 1 is a little rocky when it comes to the characterization of the main character Davy particularly, which other people have talked about at length. Davy's initial characterization can be difficult to get behind. She can be selfish and dismissive of other people, and not in a way that is ever satisfyingly addressed. But I think after seeing viewers' reception of her character, the writers made a very important pivot. In the next seasons, Davy is still a mess. She's still selfish, she's still dismissive of other people's feelings at times, she's still greatly impulsive and makes terrible decisions, but all of it feels more purposeful. Whereas in the first season, Davy was largely able to get away with being all of this without it negatively impacting her relationships, the following seasons make Davy feel the consequences of her actions, and that makes all the difference. They leaned into her being a disaster, but used it as an opportunity to show her facing her flaws and growing as a character. And that's really all I can ask for. Surprisingly, one of my favorite characters in the show is Paxton. I really didn't think that would be the case when I first started watching this show, but 3 years and 4 seasons later, I think I would go to war for him, and it's all because of the way his character developed. In a nutshell, Paxton's overarching character arc is figuring out what he wants from life. It's a very simple idea. A lot of characters in coming-of-age stories have this arc, but it's the execution here that I really like. When we first meet Paxton, he's a popular hot guy, the star swimmer on the swim team, and not very good at anything academic since his swimming prowess means that he's set for the future. Why do books and studying matter when he's going to get a swimming scholarship anyway? He only has to face the question of what his life is without swimming after he loses his swimming scholarship because Davy hit him with her car and he broke his arm. That actually happens. Again, everyone's favorite disaster they see. If season 1 is about setting up who Paxton is with his swimming persona, his relationship with academics, and the beginnings of his relationship with his family, all of which Davy impacts in some way, season 2 is about Paxton confronting who he really is. Without swimming, he's lost. At first, he's angry, but as the anger dissipates, he reflects on who he's been until now, and he realizes he wants to be different. He doesn't want to only be the jock who has no other options outside sports. He wants to have a full life. So he starts trying to better himself by seeking tutoring from Davy and actually putting effort into his classes and assignments, getting even closer to his family and friends in the process. Season 3 continues his journey and shows off the fruits of his labor, his acceptance to Arizona State, and includes the difficulties he has with both romantic and platonic relationships. And finally, Season 4 sees Paxton attend Arizona State, but start to realize that university may not be for him. He's lonely. For the first time in his life, he doesn't have any friends, and he has trouble adjusting to it all. So he moves back home and takes the position of assistant swim coach at the high school, where he finds he's happier, but still has trouble adjusting to the reality that he's staff now and not a student. Season 4 is Paxton figuring out the balance of his life. I kind of like that he dropped out of university. Paxton worked hard to get there since that was the final goal that most people are given. He wanted to do it for himself to make sure he would have a quote-unquote successful life. But once he's there, he realizes that it's not for everyone and it's not for him. His move back to the high school is also interesting because he has to really ask himself what kind of a person he wants to be. Someone who is desperately holding on to his past for the shallow happiness given to him by other people, or a genuinely good educator who cares about his students and his job, who finds satisfaction in helping others, even if it doesn't feel good all the time. Essentially, Paxton's Season 4 arc is learning how to be an adult. And out of all of the characters, he's in the unique position to be able to explore that. He's slightly older than Davy and Ben and everyone else who don't have to deal with this stuff yet, but he's still younger than the actual adults who have been doing this for years and have figured it out by now. And that's another reason that him leaving university is so great for this part of his arc, because he doesn't get that buffer that being an adult student gives you. He's just an adult now, at 19, and is told to figure it out. And in the end, he does. I really like Paxton's overall arc. I think it's fairly well done and needed in a show like this, especially since every other character knows exactly what they want from their futures. Yeah, they might change their minds on things like choosing one school over another, but at least they know they want to go to uni. And then there's Paxton. Mentally, Paxton is the embodiment of the guy standing emoji. Yeah, I bet that's how he feels when he's surrounded by people who know what they want while he doesn't. Few other miscellaneous Season 4 musings. I think it's kind of messy with its structure. I feel like a lot was happening, but then again, the other seasons, with the exception of maybe Season 1, felt the same way. I feel like we didn't get to focus as much on our supporting characters. They were a bit sidelined this season. But I love the relationship between Paxton and Davy. The very specific dynamic of two people who thought they wanted to be together but eventually realized they work a lot better as friends is really precious to me, and that's Paxton and Davy. I could have done without their kiss in the gym closet. I get that it was there for like closure and fully solidifies them as platonic, but I didn't like it. I think I would have preferred they just talk about the relationship and get closure that way. Like, if they just talked, we could clearly see that they're platonic and have been for a while. Other than that, I don't have any specific qualms to talk about. I will say I enjoyed the show for the most part. There There are some powerful themes in there that are going to resonate with young people, children of immigrants, people who have suffered loss, what have you. Yes, I have gripes, and I know there's room to criticize how Mindy Kaling repeatedly portrays brown women in the same way, but that's a different conversation. In the end, I'm surprised by how this show ended up hitting me. It's not my favorite show, but it's one that makes me feel things that I didn't think I would feel to the extent that I did, and I'd definitely watch it again if I was craving some insanity. There you have it. Those were 3 shows that I watched recently that I didn't have enough to say about to warrant a whole video. Let me know if you've seen these and what you thought about them. I want to end on a note here about the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes. Please support them. Writers are literally the backbone of film and television, and actors do so much to help bring stories to life. Every story you have ever loved was written by incredibly talented writers. I would not have a YouTube channel without writers, and so many other people wouldn't either. Some issues being fought for surround residuals from streaming and keeping AI out of writers' rooms. There are more issues, so I'm gonna leave some resources linked in the description if you want to learn more. Most writers and actors don't make a livable wage, so to say that you support the studios because the strikes are just already rich people fighting to be richer is so dumb, because, my guy, that's the studios. The studios are already rich people fighting to be richer at the expense of the talented, skilled people who are making them rich. So please, don't be an idiot. Don't support the multi-billion-dollar corporations exploiting their workers so they can make even more money. Support the artists and creatives who are just asking to be fairly compensated for their work. In support of this strike, I've decided that I won't be covering new releases on this channel. I do have one video that I've been working on for some time that does discuss something that was released more recently, but after that I will stick to discussing stuff that came out before. I know I put up a community post hinting at a Heartstopper Season 2 review, but that was scheduled a while ago and I forgot to edit it. So yeah, no Heartstopper Season 2 review. If you love film and TV at all, or, just think that people deserve to be paid for the work that they do, then please support the strikes. And with that, I'll see you in my next one.